Today I am bringing you the most toxic CC build there is. And it's kind of disgusting. Why is this build toxic? Well, it's actually toxic for two reasons. First reason, probably the more important one, is we're actually stacking up 4 different status effects. We have Foam, or Ensnare, Shock, Disorient, and Fire, which is a little bit crazy, and the overall effect of this is kind of comical. However, it's also toxic because Shock makes enemies dance around like lunatics. Disorient makes enemies fumble around like lunatics. Fire makes enemies also dance around like lunatics, which leaves Ensnare from Foam, which is probably the most viable form of CC in the game. The problem is you completely cuck yourself with it because in order to get Ensnare, it's from the grenades. So yeah, have fun doing that. Now in some groups and team setups and in some missions, it is pretty easy to get the good old Ensnare grenade on the go. However, for most things it's not going to be that worthwhile. So reason 1 as to why this is toxic is you have a lot of status effects. Reason 2 as to why it's toxic is your team hates you because everything is doing the electric boogaloo, and it's kind of irritating, especially if you stack them all up on one enemy, such as the boss in DUA, which I did at the end, and everyone then trying to get the headshots near enough became impossible because the sheer amount of status effects kind of screws over other players. However, this is ridiculously fun to play, and in terms of overall CC performance, as long as you know your missions, as I wouldn't suggest running this in the open world, as long as you know your missions, it trivializes a lot of content because stuff just doesn't move, or they move in complete tandem. This build has a weird interaction with Legendary. I think it must just be like en masse disorient, but the moment you do it, everything just stands up and runs away. It's so bizarre. I don't understand it. I've never really utilized the Banshee Pulse as a CC mechanic before, but legendary enemies interact with it in a very weird way. They fall over, touch the ground and go, oh no, I'm disoriented, and then they just stand up and literally just piss off somewhere. And they typically all, if you get a good group of them, they will typically all kind of pretty much go to the exact same place in sequence. Like they will literally, it's like they're synchronized swimmers or friggin' birds or something. They just, one just goes over there guys, and they all just up and fuck off. It's absolutely hilarious, and we were having so much fun with it. It's just unreal. But we are able to stack up a lot of status. It does work as a CC build, and we are also supporting our team because we're on that perfect galvanized binge. Huh. So, we're able to provide support to our team by 1, CCing, and 2, providing bonus armor. Obviously, this build can be made so much more influential into your team play if you ran Creeping Death. In fact, this build would actually just be performing so much better if I just put Foam and Creeping Death on, simply just because Foam is a very, very powerful staple when it comes to CC builds. However, I like mixing things up. This is how I have gone with it. I'm able to provide CC, overshield, as well as I'm also kind of capable of doing some damage, simply just because in order to get the Banshee Pulse as well as the foam grenades, we have to run Gunner, which means I got a goddamn minigun, and it can actually do some hefty chunky damage as long as you are in a decent position to actually utilize it. This build actually performed so well, we were able to get Tony DePony through his very first legendary. So congrats to Tony, and thank you very much for helping me out with this awesome video. We also have Unknown Spot running his famous Eagle Bearer because he's an absolute delinquent and just doesn't stop talking about it. And obviously we've got the one and only Sexy Dane Octavarium. Now, where this build falls short is quite simply if you don't have high DPS players in your group, you actually can't CC anything, where both the Shock Trap as well as the Banshee Pulse are going to have a cooldown. If you don't have high enough DPS or no spawn positions, this is not going to be a very worthwhile build, simply just because you're going to try CCing something. Your teammates can't kill them, they can't spread the status effect, everything is now on cooldown. So you are going to need some high class DPS builds to pair with this build. The issue then comes with where everything's going to be singing and dancing and doing absolute dumb stuff because of the statuses you're doing. You're kind of also causing an issue for them to actually get their DPS up and running, simply just because they can't hit shit. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's pretty powerful, but you need your DPS to be able to do DPS. The problem is your build kind of half prevents players from doing DPS in the first place. Now this is going to be a build I keep because I found it so fun to use, as well as the fact that it's a completely different dynamic from where I normally play CC. It is literally just foam and EMP sticky normally, whereas this was Shock Trap and the Banshee Pulse, as you can hopefully see. But yeah, it was just generally great fun. Now annoyingly, I did do an absolute boo-boo when recording this, and I've only just realised I didn't actually show the build, so we're going to have to go to the old Division 2 planner to show the build. So first of all, let's just address the elephant in the room. Imperial Dynasty. This is a personal choice for me. It is only here because I got fed up with it being in my stash and looking at it. So I thought I might as well put it on one of my characters. The issue is if I have it on one of my characters, I like to use it in a build. And it actually worked surprisingly well for this purpose. I get a skill tier out of it. I get 10% status effect. I get some Hasbro, which is meh. But it does actually put me at 50% hazard protection on this build, as well as the fire did actually come in useful if you do have a team that is able to spread it very quickly. The fire that Imperial Dynasty does put out isn't actually that powerful, it was just an extra thing I could use. We also have 4-piece Eclipse, all rolled to status effect, as you can see. 3 skill haste mods, and we are using the named electric backpack for perfect galvanize. I have one with status effect skill haste, which is pretty much the linchpin of this entire build. Obviously, like I said, this will be made better just by utilizing creeping death. However, that goes more towards just doing pure CC, whereas what I wanted to do was try and utilize a build that allowed me to provide my team with some bonus armor. We are running the gunner specialization, as I said, for 1, the Banshee Pulse to proc Disorient, as well as perfect galvanize. Disorient seems to act weirdly as well with Eclipse. Sometimes it spreads, sometimes it doesn't. I can't quite figure it out. Octa and I had a very lengthy discussion as to how this is actually interacting, and we both basically just came to the conclusion of we don't know. The shock absolutely does transfer with Eclipse, and we had absolutely 0 issues with that. The shock trap did actually come in clutch in a few locations, but you will need to play very aggressive, simply just because the best way in order to utilize the shock trap is to spawn trap with it, which is kind of hard to do because you have no direct control over where the traps themselves go, but it is also pretty awesome because of where it covers a very large area, and it can also stop robotics, which was nice looking for a perfect demonstration. We also get the minigun, which is pretty damn handy. It's probably the highest DPS possible really on this build. Yes, Scorpio is very powerful, but minigun just goes brr. It's not the highest damage, but it is worthwhile, especially if you are able to utilize it in a safe location. Also doubles up as trying to refill some of our armor. Now, like I said, we are running gunner, and our second reason we are running gunner is for the foam grenades. I don't really get to use them many times throughout this, simply just because, one, trying to hit things with a grenade is tedious. 2, I was having too much fun with the disorient and shock traps, and I completely forgot that I even had grenades. I do use them towards the end with the boss, which was quite handy, and I'm sure a welcome surprise for the teammates, simply just because, yeah, all the song and dance that the boss was doing from every other status I was doing, the foam was the only one actually really keeping him steady and in check. Overall, this was a fun build. Like I said, I will be keeping it. It was a different way to play CC, which is probably the main reason I'm going to keep it. Very much doubt it's going to become like any form of top tier CC build. It was just something different and something fun. The team were actually thankful for the activation of Perfect Galvanize on occasion, simply just because it did allow them to either move, tank a few extra shots, or actually save their life. It was quite noticeable in general. Overall though, a typical CC build would outperform this, and due to the fact of you'll be running foam, your team would generally also be a lot safer, simply just because for some dumb reason legendary and status effects just don't interact well. Had it a few times where I'd shock an enemy and they would just start skating and flying at like 1,000 miles an hour across the floor. Disorient, like I said at the start, does some weird thing. They all just interact with it very strangely and just decide we're disoriented, we'll just run off in a random direction. Foam was the only real way to actually keep anything pretty solid and in place. The Imperial Dynasty fire, I noticed it a few times, but it wasn't exactly a common sight, simply just because of the ridiculous 35-second cooldown. It on occasion was a welcome sight, just because it's just an extra status that we can throw out there, and typically when things are on fire they don't really tend to shoot you. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. This is probably the best use case I have actually come up with for Perfect Galvanize at this point. It was fun, it was engaging, it was a very different way to play. My team appreciated the bonus armor, but the overall choices that were made in performing with this build were very, very questionable, which my team didn't particularly enjoy because everything just dances, and I liked it, they didn't. Anyway, have fun, good luck, don't die, it's bad for the health.